guys doing? Excellent. Hey, we got one person that's really raring to go back to back. See, you should come down here and stand up and worship with us.
Hey. need to do is look around at the things that you've created around us. And in that we can see your greatness. Not just in that, Lord, but also in the way that you come to our hearts, the way that you meet our needs, the way that you provide for us, the way that you carry us through troubled times. You truly are a great God, and for that we praise you.
Just keep playing. What do you think? And welcome to Riverwood Church, a place for people who may have given up on church but haven't given up on God. If that's you, you're in a great place, because whether you've been a believer for a long time or you're just getting started on this journey of faith, we'd like to come alongside you and help you take that next step. We're not that concerned about where you've been. We're much more concerned about where you're going. So on your way in, you should have been given one of these. This is a program, and this is a pen. I know you've probably seen these before. But if you don't have one, we would love for you to have one in your hands right now. So if you didn't get one, the ushers are coming down the aisle right now, And you can just raise your hand. They'd be happy to give you one. Because on the inside, there is what we call a connection card. And this is very important. This is how you communicate with us and how we communicate with you. And we would love it if you take a few moments and fill this in its entirety. And you can do that throughout the service. We won't collect this until the end. But it's a way for you to get to know us and for us to get to know you. A couple important things that are going on this week and this coming month. Starting a week from today, Sunday the 6th of May and the 13th of May, we are going to have Family Picture Day. And there's an insert in here. Here we go. Family and individual pictures, these are free of charge. So we're not doing an Olin Mills thing where we give you one and we sell you a packet of 100. We're actually just going to take your picture and you can have it. We can put it in a directory, an online directory, and you can actually have a digital copy yourself. So that would be this. Wow, sorry, excuse me. I'm talking too fast. That'll be this Sunday the 6th and also the 13th. Yeah, that doesn't happen often, does it? Also, yesterday, if you were at the TLC Morrow House, would you raise your hand, please? There were, woo, exactly. If my count is right, we had 50 people from Riverwood there yesterday. It was so cool. And we accomplished just about everything that was on their list, which seems like an impossible task. The only things we really didn't get were painting and staining stuff outside because of the weather. So if you don't know what this is all about and you're wondering what I'm talking about, ask one of those people who raised their hand. It was a very cool day. Finally, we are having a very important meeting tonight at 5 o'clock at the Cruise out in Michigan. And in fact, in the 5 or 6 years I've been here, it's probably the most important meeting we've ever had. It is about the future expansion of the church, both building-wise and ministry-wise, and where God is going to take us in the next 5 years. And we would love for you to join us. Did I mention pizza is free? We will provide pizza for you. Yeah, the best pizza. That's right. So if you don't know how to get there, there's about 30 of these maps or so on the information table. So feel free to grab one of those on your way out, and that is tonight at 5 o'clock. So finally, do you know anybody around you that you don't know? Find those people you know that you don't know and welcome them here to Riverwood, and we'll get started.
That's awesome. Hey, I got to tell you what I did this weekend. I went to a brand new church for the first time in years.
A new church?
A new church, I know. I haven't been to church in years. What about you?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Well, I don't know about you, but the reason I really didn't enjoy church was church had gotten, like, really churchy. Like it was a club or something, and you had to, like, wear the right clothes or
people are judging you all the time.
All the time. You felt like you weren't, like, doing something right, or in the right crowd or something. Yeah, so that's why I stopped going, but a friend of mine really encouraged me to give this church a try. I got to tell you, Josh, it was you wouldn't even know you were at church. It was amazing. It's that building down on Highway P there that always has people, in the parking lot all days on Sundays.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen that building, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a church.
Really?
It's a church, I'm telling you. So I went ahead Sunday. I got to tell you about it. Here, have some water. And I decided I would go ahead and drive myself over there. I went to the early service because I figured I could always sneak out and get away with the rest of my day, So 9 a.m. So I drive into the parking lot. I got people smiling at me as I'm parking the car. And I kind of was wondering why they were smiling at me. They don't know me. Park the car, walk my way up to the front, and I'm going, this looks more like an office building rather than a church, Walk in the door, and it was the coolest, most casual environment. I had these great people that just came up to me and casually said hi and welcomed me in the door. And I'm thinking, here's the catch. They're going to put a visitor tag on me and make me stand out like a sore thumb. Been there before? Oh, no, they didn't do that.
What?
And they didn't do that. They just said hi, shook my hand, welcomed me, told me where the coffee was, which was in the room where they were going to be doing the preaching.
They have coffee in the room?
In the room. I didn't have to go to like a kitchen or something like that, okay? I'm thinking, okay, this isn't anything like I've ever experienced before, right? So I walk on in, and this room is set up, not with pews and straight row chairs and stuff. It's like a coffee house. with chairs around them, and they had couches, and they had lounge chairs. Am I getting your attention?
Well, yeah.
I know, it's pretty cool. So I wasn't quite sure where I was going to sit. This cool guy came over. He's in jeans in it. Jeans in church, okay? Jeans, this denim shirt. He comes over to me and he says, "Hey, let me help you find a seat." And I'm thinking, just don't take me to the front row, okay? I don't want to be seen. And he didn't. He kind of knew what was going on. He took me over to this comfortable chair. It had a table in front of it. I had my coffee. I sat down and I thought, I've never experienced anything like this before in my life. Like, I felt like at home. I didn't feel like people were staring at me like I was, some anomaly in the church or something. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It made me feel really welcome. Then when I was done, people were like, "Hey, it's great to see you. Hey, nice to have you with us. Hope we see you again."
Wow.
In a church. Yeah. Not everybody looking down their nose at me, like judging how long I've been not going to church and where did I come from. It was really kind of cool. You ought to give it a try sometime.
I think I will.
Are you really interested?
Yeah, I think so.
Why don't I pick you up on Sunday?
Sounds
9
good to
a.m.?
me. Will do.
All right. I'll see you on Sunday, Josh.
All right.
All right.
The Connections Ministry is designed to give every person that comes through the doors of Riverwood a feeling of welcome and comfort. From the moment you walk in to the moment you leave, Connections creates this environment. From the warm greeting and the friendly ushers to the coffee that we all love, everyone makes your visit enjoyable. Got faith? Got people? Got coffee.
Hey, in my day, you weren't made to feel welcome. You just went, 'cause that's what you did. And we liked it.
No matter where you are or where you've been, we are all broken and we need Jesus. We will not and do not endorse a holier-than-thou attitude. At Riverwood, this is who we are, because this is what we believe.
Holy in my day, there was a holy hierarchy. There was the pastor, and there was the deacons and the elders in all their ways. They knew everything. And then there was me, and we liked it. And they did. They liked it to death. Well, I've said it before. Right now, in this country, about 96% of everybody out there believes in God, some way or another. But church attendance is at an all-time low. It's, in this area, right around 17%. That's a surprise to a lot of people who are used to church, but not too surprising for people who like not being there. So we built a church, started it for people who were like that, who were disenfranchised and far away and didn't really care for church much, but kind of liked the idea about believing in God and maybe even Jesus. So now we're building a church like that for the next generation. Because the younger people are in this world, even some of them younger than me, there is a generation that will be changed because of something that we did here. A lot of the churches, and I say it with a degree of sadness, really, are not going to be here in 5 or 10 years. And it's not because they're bad places. It's just because they've literally grown old, literally. And the people who supported and maintained that church for decades are now leaving us in large numbers. So we're faced with a time where the need for church is greater than it's ever been. And yet churches are failing in large numbers, closing their doors at a rate of something like 3,000 a year in this country. It's really sad. And there's only about 2,000 being planted. And so with population numbers rising and churches failing and far too few being started, we have a real difficulty seeing where this is going to go after this. So we wanted a church where people could
belong before they believe much of anything, because most people don't really know too much of what they believe. But once they believe something, they find out that that truth is real, and the truth can change them so that they become something that they never thought they could be. That's a fair enough thing, isn't it? I mean, that's what authentic faith is supposed to do. It's supposed to reach down and change us. So we're talking about the stuff that really matters the most right now. And you may be wondering in your life, well, what is the stuff that really matters? You never thought about that much. Well, we'll come up with 7 things that you just got to do before the end of your life. And for some of you, well, maybe for all of us, who knows? That's not so far away. These are the things that are most important. So we think they're important for the church. We think they're important for us. So I want you to start off with a simple little exercise. I want you to take your right thumb and place it on your left thumb. All right, ready? Everybody got this? Right thumb on left thumb. And slide it up to the base of the thumb. And just bend up a little bit. There, do you feel that? Thumb, 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 thumb. Good. Excellent. You're alive. You know what that means? God still has a plan for you. God has a plan for you in this world. And if you found that plan, it means the fact that God has this thing for you that nobody else can do. In the same way that God has a plan for this church that no other church can fulfill. So we live, most of us, in this like daily grind. It's not bad. It's not great. It's not real satisfying oftentimes. We often ask, is my life making a difference? And what we want to do is affirm the fact that yes, it should, and it does. So you should be asking yourself the question, is my life making a difference? Is the next generation going to be better off for me having lived? Is anybody going to know something that they could have only known through me? So the problem is that there are a lot of people out there. And what you find out with people is that they're all messed up. I found out that the only ones that I know who are doing well are the ones that I don't know really well. That's what I found out. And the closer you get to people, the more you find out, wow, this deep streak of rebellion and brokenness and all that, it just doesn't run across the planet and through cultures or nations, or it runs right through the center of the human heart. It's like all of us are this way. The old saying goes, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it was and will always be yours. If it never returns, it was never yours to begin with. If it just sits in your living room, messes with your stuff, eats your food, uses your telephone, takes your money, and never appears to know that you set it free in the first place, you either married it or gave birth to it. So what I discovered is that love is hard because people are ornery. Me too. You know, try living with me for a while. Just talk to my wife. She'll tell you. Yeah, there's some. I never heard a witness on that. Relationships are hard in this place. And it's hard because people are ornery and they're kind of messed up. So most of us wonder the same thing. If love is the key to everything, and people are so messed up and they're so difficult to have a relationship, then how in the world do you do that? We long to know if love really makes a difference or whether we're just like, it's an exercise in futility or something. As long as we question this, we wonder if God can show up in us. If the love of God can really make a difference in us so we can make a difference with other people. As long as we're discouraged about that, we're discouraged about a lot of things. There was a man who mournfully said that he lived his life like the professor on Gilligan's Island. One of my least favorite shows of all time. I cannot understand that show. To this day, I can't. I don't even understand why they play the theme song on an organ at the baseball game. This just baffles me. But nonetheless, this guy found no time to fashion, the professor, he found time to fashion generators out of palm fronds and vaccines out of algae, but he never got around to fixing that big hole in the boat so he could go home. Part of the show I never got. Why did they fix the boat? They got, But how many people actually do in this world? So here's something to ask yourself. Is there like a huge hole in my heart that I've never fixed? Do I care for the moral failure? Do I care for the broken people out there? For the less than me? I love the celebrity phrase. I want to give back to the people less fortunate than me. Because I'm so good. I just never got that. When I die, then, will anybody know that I actually lived? is my life meaningful or just mediocre? Ordinary or extraordinary? Significant or just kind of silly? And I hope at the end of your days you don't look back with a lifetime of regret about the things you could have and should have done. Most especially to help those in your world that can only be helped by you. Elisha Kaufman is a historian who wrote an article called Beyond Pearl Harbor. It's an extraordinary story. Really, I mean, this is one of the most amazing stories you'll ever hear. It relates the poignant and inspiring saga of Jacob DeShazer and Mitsuo Fuchida. And Jacob DeShazer was a guy who was in captivity in a Japanese POW camp in China. And he got there because in 1942, he was one of Doolittle's raiders. And if you know anything about World War II history, you know that right after the Pearl Harbor event, America was completely, almost disabled in the Pacific Fleet and in all that area of the world. And it was everything they could do to mount the modicum of an attack against the Empire of Japan that had just dealt them this seemingly mortal blow. And so on a flyer, they just put a carrier out in the middle of the Pacific as close to Japan as they could get with the fuel they had. And they took some airplanes that weren't designed to go off carriers, and they flew these bombers. And Doolittle led that raid, and they dropped a few bombs around Tokyo as sort of as much as anything, an emotional uplift to the country that, yes, we can strike back. Well, DeShazer was part of that party, and there he is in those days. He just died about 6 years ago, by the way, one of that great generation of people. So when his fuel ran out, as none of these planes were designed to make it back to the ship from which they took off. They all crashed, and they were trying to get to China-friendly territory, and he didn't quite make it that far. And he was put in a POW camp under the Japanese in 1942. Now, get this. If you know anything about those POW camps, especially in that area of the world in those days, it was as brutal can be. He was in Nanjing in China and then later in Beijing. During this time, though, he became a Christian. Extraordinary, but he did. He found then his heart, now catch this, was softened toward his Japanese captors. After being liberated, DeShazer wrote a widely distributed essay, I Was a Prisoner of the Japanese, and circulated it not in this country, but in Japan, detailing his experiences of his capture, his conversion, and the forgiveness that he found and the forgiveness that he offered. Now here's the other side of this most extraordinary story. Mitsuo Fuchida grew up loving his native Japan and hating the United States, which treated Asian immigrants harshly in the first half of the 20th century. No question about that. Fuchida attended a military academy, joined Japan's Naval Air Force, and by 1941, with 10,000 flying hours behind him, had established himself as the nation's top pilot. When Japanese military leaders looked for someone to lead, command, and design a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, they chose Fuchida. Fuchida was the voice that sent his aircraft carrier the message, Tora, 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 if you've seen the films. Tiger, tiger, tiger. And that was a secret message that meant to say the attack was a complete surprise and was bound to be a success. There's Fuchida on the carrier deck. Those airplanes dropped bombs on Pearl Harbor. And even though it's difficult maybe for a generation today to understand what that was like, it was like 9/11 3 times over. Because it really did draw us into a world war in which every American was affected. And tens of thousands of them died. Well, Fuchida and DeShazer met in 1950. DeShazer had returned to Japan in 1948, 3 years after the armistice. In 1948, 3 years later, he goes back to Japan as a missionary to speak to those people who had tortured and confined him. He met Fuchida. Fuchida had come across DeShazer's testimony, that little pamphlet that he had created. And it started him thinking. He went out and bought a Bible. He bought a Bible because of DeShazer's testimony. DeShazer had just recently finished a 40-day fast asking for revival in Japan when Fuchida came to his home and introduced himself DeShazer welcomed the new believer, encouraged him to be baptized. While DeShazer continued to plant churches throughout Japan, listen, Fuchida became an evangelist. The guy who bombed Pearl Harbor became an evangelist, spreading a message of peace and forgiveness in his native country and throughout Asian American communities. This is what he looked like later in his days. He became an evangelist in a country and to a country that didn't even like him much. Isn't that amazing? He goes from the carrier deck bombing Pearl Harbor to that. Here's what Fuchida wrote about his life. That morning, December 7th, I lifted the curtain of warfare by dispatching that cursed order, and I put my whole effort into the war that followed, and he certainly did. But after buying and reading the Bible, my mind was strongly impressed and captivated. I know that feeling. Here's what he said. Now listen, I think I can say today without hesitation that God's grace has been set upon me. How about you? Do you think it's possible for a man like Fuchida to look at another human being anywhere, any way, and see anything less than who he is? Is it possible for somebody, having been redeemed from that, to be contemptible about the life of anybody else? So today, this is the third part in the series of messages, What Matters? The 7 most important things to do with your life. And this week, we're going to explore this very simple but core belief in us. How we see other people reveals who we are and what we think God thinks about people. Here's the secret. Whatever you think God thinks about you and others gives you permission to think the same thing. So here's a very simple idea for you. Ready? I will let God turn me from contempt to compassion. There it is. Would you read it with me? I will let God turn me from contempt to compassion. One more time. I will let God turn me from contempt to compassion. You may not think that you have much contempt, but I'm here to argue with you on that one. How many people think that God loves Mother Teresa, when she was living? Amazing, right? How many think that God loves Billy Graham? Yeah. It's hard to imagine people who have done more good in the world than those. How many people think that God loves King Assad, the president of Syria, the guy who's just massacred over 10,000 more of his own people? How many think that God had a deep, unending, and abiding compassion for Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden? Anybody? No, because everybody knows that when you're dealing with people like that, you've reached the contemptible. And everybody knows that it's good to have contempt for people who are that contemptible. G.K. Chesterton, a Catholic theologian, said something really crucial. All men matter, you matter, I matter. It's the hardest thing in theology to believe, and that's the reason why. Contempt is easy. Compassion is hard work. Jesus was motivated by this misinformation. It was this: a holy God can't love a moral failure. A holy God has no interest in moral failures. That's what they thought. God thought. God has only contempt for those who are contemptible. And then they went about building a religious system that built that into the foundation of their beliefs. The result, if we believe God has contempt for them, then we have permission to have contempt too. Not only permission, but maybe an obligation to have contempt for them. How else are they ever going to get the message, we think? So Jesus, because he saw this going on within the context of the people to whom he was born and through whom he was about to give the message to the world, he saw that and he said, this is so important, you can't miss it. And he stacked 3 parables, the only time in all of his teaching that he just 1, 2, 3, one after another. And he said, I don't want you to miss this message. I don't want you to miss this. This is way too important. So I don't like throwing out terms without definition. So let's ask the question first. What's a parable anyway? Because you hear this thing in Bible parables. And so Anyway, it's just two things thrown together to help clarify. It's a fiction, a story, that brings feeling to a fact. They're trying to make a point, and they want to do it with emotional impact. It's a story told to illustrate a principle and have an impact with people, right? So he illustrated this concern by weaving a tapestry of 3 stories that each have 3 threads running through them that reveal God's compassion, not his contempt for those far away, for those broken. The parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the lost son, sometimes referred to as the story of the prodigal son. So I want to set the stage by reading a paragraph to kind of give you an idea of what was going on when Jesus was telling these stories. Jesus, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but there's a lot of incidents in this when you read about his life. And Jesus loved a party. Not only did he like a party, he liked partying with people who liked to party. And I think you could also draw the conclusion that he didn't like much partying with people who hated partiers. What fun is in that? So he would hang with the people who liked being with him because he liked being with them. And he was in a moment like that when he found a guy called Levi. After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. Now, let me draw a quick, point here. Levi meant that he was a part of the Levitical priesthood tribe. The people who were supposed to be worshiping God and leading others in worship. That was part of his family's lineage. That was his calling, being a Levite. But he had become, instead of somebody leading his people in worship, a tax collector, leading the Romans to the people that had the money. He was not just a part of the 1% here. We're talking about somebody who had turned on his own people. See, the Romans didn't care whether they collected the amount that they wanted. They could collect any amount they wanted to. Anything that paid the Romans, and they could take whatever was left. So the motivation on these tax collectors was to just rake people over the coals. They usually became very powerful, very influential, very wealthy, and isolated from their people because everybody hated them. Everybody hated them. So Jesus says to this guy, Levi, follow me. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Now, what did he leave? He left his position. He left his power. He left his prestige. He left his wealth. He left everything and followed Jesus. That's somebody who was very impressed, wouldn't you say? But though he was impressed with Jesus, the other people who were religious of the day were not impressed with him or with Jesus. This guy, by the way, Levi, became the disciple Matthew, who wrote the gospel Matthew, and was so impressed and so changed by his encounter with Jesus that, as history says, he later died as a martyr for his faith. He went from tax collector, despised and contemptible, to a believer and follower, still despised and contemptible, but for different reasons, all the way to a death for the sake of Jesus. Then, so what does Levi do? As soon as, he finds out that Jesus wants to be his friend, he says he holds a great banquet for Jesus at his house, And a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. Now, this is difficult to get, okay? Because in those days, if you were a good religious person, you never hung with these guys. Matter of fact, that's the last place you'd want to go. It would make you religiously defiled to go into the home of somebody like that. So no good rabbi would ever be found anywhere near this guy. He goes to his home. Now you can imagine it's sort of a palatial kind of a thing, a big place, and he has a big party. Who does he invite? All the religious folks and the good people who have no use for him? No, he invites all of his buddies, the riffraff, the rejects, the rebels, the people who were just completely ugly in the world. All the people who were contemptible. And so there's this party going on inside, and they're in Jerusalem, and so people are hearing this party, So again, you have to kind of get a picture for what these houses are like. This is arid in the Middle East, kind of a desert climate. When you have a party, it's not like you close the windows. There were no windows. They opened the shutters, and it was like a wide open thing. Who could hear the party? The whole town. Now, you think about this. So the religious people think it's their job to enforce the rules. So they go look for the party and find out what's going wrong. Because anytime anybody's having too much fun, we know something has to be illegal. And so they come to the party, and they find Jesus' followers outside the party and ask him, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Why are you doing that? Now, here's an interesting facet to this story. Why are the disciples outside? Because clearly those religious people didn't come into the house to ask Jesus. They asked the disciples. They're outside. Now, Jesus did a bunch of radical things, but this is one thing they couldn't even tolerate. Okay, Jesus, you can go in that party with those folk, but listen, that's not for us. Because we know what's right and wrong. We're not about ready to be defiled by that contemptible garbage in there. We're too good for this. This was everywhere in that culture. Everywhere. And in highly defined religious societies, it's almost always like this. Jesus answers them. How does he come out to answer them? Well, you can imagine Peter out there going, well, I'm not really sure what the good explanation for this is. Maybe we should ask Jesus. So they get Jesus out there and talk to these guys. And he says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. That's a fascinating line. Because the straight fact is this. They were all sick, but just for different reasons, as I'll explain in a little bit. So that's the setup, and you find the beginning of that story in Luke chapter 5. The rest of the story, we're going to spend the rest of the time in Luke chapter 15. If you're interested, you can look it up in page 1047 in one of these here Bibles. Some of them are on the rack if you want to grab one. I'm actually going to read the whole chapter. Don't freak out on me, because I'm going to go fast. All right? Here's the deal. When you want God to turn you from contempt to compassion, you have to figure out how Jesus did what he did and why. This is important stuff. God doesn't think like we do. If he did, we'd all be lost. We'd all be dead. We'd all be contemptible in his sight. He weaves these three stories, and there are three threads in each one of them, right? Every one of them has all these components. And the first one starts with the parable of the lost sheep. A very familiar story to a lot of people. Again, here's another party. This is like 10 chapters later in the story. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, having a party with him again. They loved being with him. He loved being with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered. You can just hear this, can't you? Mutter. I love that word. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Yep, we're back to that same cause. They're harping on the same, harp. Playing on the same harp. Harping on the same message. They're doing it again. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? He takes a risk. If the 100 sheep is all he's got, he loses one. That's important. So he goes out, exposes the 99 to danger just to find the one that was lost. And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need repentance. Now listen. So he compares the lost sheep to the people like he was with, and the found sheep to the ones who were ones he left to find the one who was lost. Are you getting the picture here? He thought they were so important. Now here are the three threads. Something of great value is missing. That great missing object resulted in a great search. And after the great search, there was a great party. Every one of these three stories have all those three elements in it. In this particular case, there was a lost sheep. Listen to me. Listen. If God had not sought us, none of us would be found. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. He was all in when it came to this thing. Following an exhilarating performance at the New York Carnegie Hall, celebrated classical cellist Yo-Yo Ma. With a name like that, you've got to become a cello player. He went home, slept, awoke the next day exhausted and rushed. He called for a cab to take him to a hotel on the other side of Manhattan and placed his cello, handcrafted in Vienna in 1733 and worth $2.5 million, in the trunk of a cab. You guessed it. He gets to his destination, runs out of the cab, goes, and then the next day realizes he doesn't have his instrument with him. Now, that's a big one. Fortunately, he still had the stub from the ticket and the number of the cab, and so they called and they found out that the cab was parked in a garage in Queens, and the cello was still in the trunk. That's a nice story. Don't you think he was a little motivated there for a few hours? Don't you think that that mattered enough that somehow a search was employed? And it was not just any search. It was the thing that meant the most to him. It wasn't just the money. It was the thing that allowed him to make music. So he gave up everything. All other things went on hold until he got that back. You get the idea? When God sees missing people, everything else goes on hold, and he goes after them. Now listen, if you're part of the lost and the far away and the broken, been there, God is mobilizing an all-out search for you. And here's how you know the signs. And this will surprise you a bit, I think. You recognize the signs when you realize you're asking questions you never asked before. What am I here for? Is there anything for me in this place that is, significant for me? Why am I sucking air in this? Is there anything beyond this life? Then you know that God's searching for you, because now you're thinking about him. If you've been under the pressure of a lot of trials and troubles recently, and it's made you for the first time in your life thinking, this life is out of control. I need something beyond me. Then you know God's knocking. If you're surprised by that, just understand this. I don't think anybody ever looked for God until they had to. We don't until we do. Until we have to, then we look. And if there are people in your life, there's somehow or another you're looking around saying, gee, I think that person has something I don't, then you know. These are all messages that you matter, and God is reaching and speaking to you. Don't miss the signs. That's what he's doing. That's what he's after. So, when that happens to you, know that you're in the process. For you who are close and forgiven, listen. We are debtors in this world. God sacrificed out of compassion, and we should do no less, because that's what God is like. He is not full of contempt. He's full of compassion. And if you don't build a church that's like that, you haven't built a church that looks anything like the one that Jesus designed. First thread, something of great value is missing. Second thread, that's something great motivated a great search. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins, loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, search carefully until she finds it? Something lost, great value is lost, and that lost makes this great search. And at the close of the search comes a party, surprise, and she calls her friends together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. Well, it wasn't just any coin, probably, because in those days, 10 silver coins formed the dowry of any young woman. So I think the implication is this. They would braid this into a headband oftentimes to kind of like indicate to the rest of the world, not only am I available, I'm set up. Not too much has changed over the years in this particular regard. So, but what it meant for her was that she had not just lost a coin, she may have lost her future, because anything less than the 10 meant that you had somehow messed up, or your family wasn't proper, right? Years ago, Colleen received a tremendous gift. It was from her mom, but it had belonged to her grandmother. It was a platinum wedding ring with a beautiful stone in it, worth a lot of money. We never did have it appraised. You make a lot of mistakes in this world, and that's one of them we made. But we never had it appraised, and then one day, it just, was missing. It's important when you start opening the garbage bags and sifting through coffee grounds and diapers. Yeah, then you know it's big. I would love to tell you there was a happy ending to that story. But not only was it not a praise, we never found it. There was no rejoicing that day. Let me tell you. It was a beautiful ring. And it wasn't just worth a lot. It was a keepsake. It was a family heirloom to the third generation. And it was also gone. Gone. On February 24th in 2001, a one-year-old Canadian girl named Erica somehow wandered out of his mother's home and her bed and got out the back door and walked off into the Edmonton winter in the middle of February. Her mom woke up the next morning, realized the child wasn't in the room, then quickly realized the child wasn't in the house. Could you imagine that? Have you ever lost a child even for a little bit? Man, it just goes right to the pit of your stomach, doesn't it? And panic sets in when she found the back door ajar. And she went in a frantic search all over and found her unconscious in the snow. Erica was rushed to Edmonton Stollery Children's Health Center, and through the heroic work of doctors and miraculous thing that most people just looked at and said, that had to be God. See, when they found her, she was stiff. Her body was literally frozen. All signs of life were gone. And yet she came back to life and had a full recovery. But if you've ever lost a child, you know exactly how Erica's mom felt. Listen, if you are a missing child at the table of God, that's how he feels about you. There's no other way to look at it than that. That was what Jesus was saying to those people who were those religious folks. What was missing mattered to somebody. Listen, God doesn't love us because we're valuable. We're valuable because he loves us so much. We have infinite value because of his infinite love. A father, they say, is a man who has traded all the money in his wallet for pictures. Okay. So God is your father and your picture in his wallet. You matter to him. And so does every other contemptible person on the face of the planet. People who are missing matter to God. Even if it's only 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000,000, they matter. First thread, something of great value is missing. Second, something great motivated a great search. And thirdly, when you found that great lost thing, it motivated a great party. And here's where the story gets really interesting. So we'll take it back up with the most familiar element of this thing, the story of the lost son, the prodigal. There were 100 sheep, 1 was lost. There were 6 coins, 1 was lost. Pretty odds are getting bigger. And then there was a man who only had 2 sons, and one of them went missing. There was a man who had 2 sons. He said, the younger one said to the father, Father, give me my share of the estate. And the question is, what share would that be? As the younger son, not much. What happened was the father actually, for whatever reason, gave him the share that probably belonged to the older son. He divided his property between them. Now, this would have been the most despicable thing that a son could ever do to his father in those days in that area of the world. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and knew what he had in mind right from the beginning. He set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Now, this is as low as it goes for a Hebrew boy, right? This is as bad as it gets. And Jesus is setting this up to make this guy look the worst he can possibly look. He dishonors his dad. He disowns, he takes everything that he didn't deserve and goes off and wastes everything in wild living. And then he gets to the place where he's so desperate, he's feeding pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now there's a desperate kid. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out, go back to my father, say to him, and he rehearses a speech, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Father, I I've sinned against heaven, against earth, and no one will be. I hear him rehearsing this as he walks back home, right? So he got up, went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with contempt? No. Filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And then his son starts the rehearsed speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And he cuts him off. And he says, enough of that. Enough of that. The father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. Now that meant to say, all of my property still belongs to you. I'm giving you the best. Put a ring on his finger. That meant to say, I'm restoring you as a son. And put sandals on his feet. You're not a slave here. You're never going to be a slave here. You're my child. Bring the fattened calf, kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. Something of great value was missing. It occasioned a great search. He was looking for him every day. And when he came and was found again, there was a great party. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. They began to celebrate. J. Granger had a son. He had just called home. And here's what his dad said about what had been happening. Through years of drug abuse, Scott has stolen from our family, manipulated us, and failed us. It had been a relief not to hear from him for 2 years. Scott had told me he'd been through a rehab program a year and a half ago that provided something no other rehab had offered. I met Jesus Christ. I've been forgiven from my past. I want to ask you and Mom to forgive me too. He said it was now helping other addicts get straightened out. And Dad said, listen, I was torn between hope and cynicism. The well-groomed, bright-eyed young man who arrived at the airport looked like a stranger. In the days that followed, Scott told how in the midst of drug withdrawal, he'd seen a vision of Jesus Christ on the cross and cried out to him for help. His withdrawal symptoms miraculously ended. That experience led him to a church. I asked Jesus to be my Lord, he quietly explained, and my life hasn't been the same since. The change in Scott was too dramatic for my wife and me to ignore, said the dad. Today, Jesus has given us the same new life he gave our prodigal son. Now listen, I don't know what side of that story you're on, but God never wastes a pain. He never lets a wound go unnoticed. And he frequently turns those things into the best part of life. That's what God does. You think there was a party in that family? I think there's been a big party for a long, long time. And that story sounds sort of familiar to me because I was a young guy lost like that. I had enough friends, knew what I wanted to do, was smart enough maybe, but there was a time when I recognized just how lost a person can be and how much I needed somebody to find me because I had no idea where found was. So I looked and he found. And on that day, when he found me, he wrote my name in his book. And over the gates of heaven, a banner was struck that said, welcome home. Welcome home, my son. Now, you would think there'd be a party for every prodigal who comes home, but you'd be wrong. Because this wasn't good news to the people listening. See, the story takes a strange twist here. The primary audience for the story was a religious audience of really good, upright people who had just dedicated their life to following God. The younger son is like the moral failure, deciding to run off. The older son is like a religious person who stays home for the payoff. So one runs off, one waits for the payoff. And here's where the story really gets kind of twisted. Jesus designed it this way so that they would get the point. And this is the core of it all. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. Now, catch this. The older son, who's gotten everything in this world that he had because of his father, was angry with his dad. Now, if you're a religious person and you spent your whole life doing good stuff, just knowing that that was what your self-esteem rested on and that's what your relationship with God rested on, and this is not good news. You're kind of hacked off that God would cut anybody a break because you worked so hard for your position with him, right? Yet he says, you never gave me even a young goat. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and never have I disobeyed your orders. I've done everything you asked of me. And this is how you treat me? I can't believe it. Here is the great danger about religious systems that are built like this. When something goes wrong, we think it's God's fault. I've done everything I can to be a good boy, a good girl. And this thing happened to me anyway. What's with that? You get kind of angry because God couldn't control that somehow. God couldn't take that away somehow. He couldn't make the pain go away. He couldn't make it better for you. And then he says the most distasteful thing that a father could hear. But when this son of yours comes home, he's not my brother. I want nothing to do with that contemptible piece of junk. But when this son of yours comes home, you do the fattened calf thing and have a party in his honor? What's with that? He wasted all your money on not just frivolous, but evil things. And you have a party for him. And he says, the dad says, my son, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate. Because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. Here's the point. Both of the sons are alienated from the father. The younger wants the father's money, not the father, and he got it by demanding it and then just leaves in a huff. The older son stayed obedient to get what? The father's money, to get the payoff. Neither of them loved the father in the beginning of the story. At the end, and here's the funny part, at the end, the bad boy is saved and the good boy is lost. The elder was infuriated at God and lost because of his goodness. I've always been a good boy. I deserve everything. Why am I not getting it? Listen here. The religious guy says this: I obey, and therefore I'm accepted. I obey, and my self-esteem is hanging on that. Woe to the person who falls from that point of grace. He obeys God to get things from him. She is angry with moral failures to get grace, a free ride. What's with that? He's angry when God doesn't give her what she deserves. You know, if God's a judge, then he's going to dump all over. The self-esteem then is based on good doctrine and hard work. That's it. And it also means that we have freedom. We can't forgive because they can't feel superior to a moral failure. You can't feel superior to that. And it gives us this permission to be contemptible. Contempt is the coin of the realm for religious communities oftentimes. Christianity says this, on the other hand: I am accepted, therefore I follow. Therefore I obey. Therefore I love. It's because of gratitude, not because of guilt, that I do what I do. He's grateful because he earned nothing and was given everything. Gratitude is the coin of the realm for a truly spiritual community. You can walk into a church almost anywhere and smell this in the air, one way or the other. That's true of any religious community. I'm not talking about just Christianity here, but you anywhere out there. Here's the idea again. I will let God turn me from contempt to compassion. Contempt is so easy. Compassion, that's a hard game. So what changes if you believe this? Well, you do again. You're so grateful that you're ready to follow anywhere. You become compassionate about moral failures. You realize that you deserve contempt as much as anybody else. Why would I not give grace to somebody else? I've received so much. And here's the other secret. Now, this is where church really comes in. Eternity changes here. I say we play for all the marbles here because we play for all the marbles here. This is about life, not just for 70 years on a turning planet in the middle of space, but forever. Not just for a few days or for a lifetime, it's forever. What would have happened if Jacob de Shazer had not been turned from contempt to compassion for his captors? What would it have been like for Fushida? Would he be able to say, I think I can say today without hesitation that God's grace has been set upon me, of all people in the world, me? Two former mortal enemies living together in eternal joy. Who would have thunk it? Well, listen. You can bend the arc of eternity. You can change people's lives, not just for a few months or years, but forever. Now, I would suggest that if we ever did this, we would look a lot different than we look today, probably. If we ever took this seriously, what kind of a church would this be? It'd be a mature church. Do you know what a mature church looks like? Tons of immaturity all around. Right? Yes, tons of immaturity. Some people think that really mature Christian communities know their Bible backward and forward. That isn't a mature community because oftentimes they're the most closed and restricted and righteous-looking, contempted people in all the world. Right? I've seen it happen, haven't you? The mature community is the one with immaturity everywhere because new believers are always being born. A one-year-old apple tree isn't mature. You know why? It doesn't produce fruit. Mature churches do. That's the mark of a mature church. It's not how much you know. It's how much compassion is built into the lost and the broken. That's what makes a mature church. Same thing makes for a mature person. So, what would the world look like if we believe this? What do you think? What do you think? Hopeful, grateful, changed? Yeah. Maybe this area could be different in a few years from now if we did the right things today. What would eternity look like? Can you imagine just one day walking around in that place and your Fuchita comes up to you and says, you know, if it hadn't been for you praying that day, if it hadn't been for you and what you said that day, I know it didn't mean much to you, but it meant everything to me. I know people like that for me. And they know people like that for them. And I wonder if I could be so bold as to ask you, is anybody going to say that to you 100 years from now? 1,000? Because this changes everything. God is asking us, listen, does what matters to me matter to you? I sent my son for people just like that. Don't miss my message here. And the irony is that the closer people feel that they are to God, the more right they feel they have to be contemptible to those for which God has unending compassion. It's the strangest thing. So, one last word, and that's to those who might feel that they're still lost. Maybe like a sheep, you feel like you kind of wandered away. Sheep do that. Maybe like a coin, somebody dropped you. Ever feel like that? You were just dropped and walked away, neglected. Or maybe like a son, you did it on your own. You just took off, ran away. But the search keeps coming up empty for you. Well, listen. In the middle of the party, Jesus told the story for the people listening as the religious folk. But can you imagine how great that felt for those who were the despised and those who were contemptible? How that must have felt for them to hear that story and to say, he's on my side. He doesn't hate me. He isn't contemptible. I'm not contemptible to him. He loves me. So I plead with you again. And don't let the moment pass, all right? God is speaking. Don't close your ears to that voice. Because once you're found, everything changes. Let's pray. God, we are just so grateful to you for what you have done. Not just in coming to seek and to save us when we didn't deserve it, but in caring enough to do so. And then entrusting us with this message that you have given. Entrusting us with the most valuable things in the world. So we're thankful for that. And we're thankful for what we have been given. Gratitude is not enough. We give you our lives too. And for those who aren't sure, and this is a good moment perhaps, to say to him, listen, I need you. I know that now. And I ask you to be my forgiver. You said that if I asked you, you would forgive me for everything I ever did. I trust you to do that. I want you to make me your child. You said if I received you, you would give me the right to be a child of yours. And I trust you to do that. And I want you to be my leader from this point forward. I'll follow you. You can take my life, make me into whatever you want. And I'll be grateful all along the way. So grateful for the grace that made it all possible. In Jesus' name and for his sake. And everybody agreed and said, amen.
Okay, well, thanks for coming today. The connection card that you pulled out in the beginning, if you would complete that. If you're new with us today, you can let us know that on the front. If it's your first or second time, or you're still just kind of checking this thing out. And if you are, we have a free gift for you today. This is a book called Since Nobody's Perfect, How Good is Good Enough. If you haven't grabbed one of these yet and you're still kind of new, go ahead and grab one off of the table in the lobby there, but between the two exit doors as you go out of the lobby. That's our gift for you today. And in fact, that's all that we would expect from you today. If you're a member or a regular attender, of course, you know that when you turn in this card with the ushers at the back of the room, that this is also the opportunity for you to give back to God a little bit of what he has given us. It's one of the ways in which we worship him, and it's also how we provide for the ministries that God is doing in and through the people here at Riverwood. Of course, on the back, there are different ways that you can interact with us. If you would like to be a part of the bike blessing and ride that's going to happen this Saturday at 9 a.m. right here, please check that on here so we can plan for the correct numbers. If you don't ride, but you got a bicycle or an ATV, bring that. We'll bless that, and that's fine. You just probably won't be able to keep up with us on the ride. And then most importantly, tonight, the meeting at 5 o'clock at the cruise in Tishigan. If you don't know how to get there, there are maps on the information table. If you have something else planned tonight, I would encourage you even, it's not common, but why don't you switch your plans? This is going to be a really important and exciting meeting tonight, and we would love to have you there to be a part of it with us. So have a great day, and we'll see you at 5 o'clock tonight.